Hey everyone, Peter Maravellis here. I hope this finds you all safe and well. On behalf of City Lights booksellers and publishers, I'd like to welcome you to City Lights Live, the virtual reading series that follows in the footsteps of our in-store calendar during the time of the pandemic. We are beaming to you from unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land, from where we continue to celebrate the works of authors we know and love with readings, discussions, and forums, moving into the fall season and hopefully towards a COVID-free era. Tonight, we are delighted to have with us a wordsmith of keen ability and a very, very gifted storyteller. We are happy to welcome into our virtual halls Saïd Sayrafiezadeh. We are celebrating his new book, American Estrangement, a collection of very awesome short fiction published by the venerable W.W. Norton. Mr. Sayrafiezadeh's writing has appeared in The New Yorker, the Paris Review, Granta, the New York Times Magazine, and McSweeney's. He is the author of the memoir, When Skateboards Will Be Free, and the short fiction collection, Brief Encounters with the Enemy. He's also a playwright. He is a recipient of a Whiting Award and a Cullman Center Fellowship. Teaches at New York University and Hunter College and makes his home in Manhattan. He will be joined in conversation tonight by Ed Park. Ed Park is an editor, journalist, and novelist. He was the executive editor of Penguin Press, also founding editor of The Believer and the former editor of the Voice Literary Supplement. He's also worked as an editor at the Poetry Foundation and is the author of the novel Personal Days. His writing has appeared in The New Yorker. So please help us in giving a very warm welcome to Saïd and Ed. Gentlemen, welcome to City Lights Live.
Thank you, Peter. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Happy to
Peter,
be
thank you for saying my name correctly. If anything else happens tonight, we know that at least went well. That went well.
So, Saïd, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you, Ed.
Happy Pub Day. The book is incredible. I want to urge everyone to buy the book either during or after this Q&A. It is. I'm convinced that it's going to be the best book of stories you read this year. It's just incredible.
Thank you, Ed. Hey, by the way, hey Ed.
Yeah.
I just want to say, the problem with Zoom is, so I've looked to see who's actually watching, and of course there are thousands. And I'm so disappointed that I can't say hi to you all personally. I see that I've got some students here. We've got some mutual writing friends here. So just all know that if we were in person, we would all be hanging out and saying hi, blah, blah, blah. So, and thank you all for coming. Yeah. And the students have, by the way, the backdrop for me with my students, they've all seen this backdrop like all semester long. Oh, so here we go again. Okay. All right, let's do it. Let's make magic.
Well, do you want to kick things off with reading, or should we want to talk a little bit about, why don't we talk a little bit about the book first, and then we'll kind of get into it. The book, as I've said, it just blew me away. The first lines kill me, and the last lines kill me, and everything in between is really good, really amazing too. I guess this is something we can return to, but I'm just kind of fascinated when you write stories. How do you? Is it the line? The lines give me so much pleasure. Is it sort of a line, a voice that you have, or is it more of a situation, some amalgamation of both, or how would you? Yeah, you know what? For these stories in particular, yeah. I'm
sorry, say again.
No, for this book in particular, because I know different kinds of books. Yeah,
I think it's a combo. It's a combo. It's some sense of, I want to say something about this thing.
Yeah,
I want to say something. I want to describe something. I want to portray something. That's kind of like the thing that gets me going. But once I get going, this is what happens. It's, for me, I am slave to the sentence. Yeah. The sentences dictate how it's going to unfold. Yeah. So you said you like the opening lines. Thank you, by the way, I appreciate that. And so when I write the opening sentence, it's like, now I'm boxed in. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to, not all of this is conscious, but I'm trying to like compress a bunch of info into the opening. And now it's almost like I've got to like I've got to live up to the opening line. I've got to live up to it.
I hear you.
Am I freezing, by the way?
No, not at all.
Okay, good. Thank God.
You're good. Yeah.
That's all we need. That's what we. So yeah, start with hey, I'm inspired to portray something, but now I'm kind of I'm serving the sentences. They're dictating what happens next for me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, and I think there's something about these stories where, I mean, we can get into how varied they are, but they all have, you know, an extremely high level of quality. But I also kind of like the way that you know, the first sentence, we could read any of these first sentences and it's an instant hook, and I kind of know that I'm in good hands, but I don't know exactly where I'm going. And there are a couple of stories where I really don't know. I'm following the voice, and these are all first-person stories, which we can also talk about, written in the first-person voice. And what I love is like how, you know, a third of the way through or halfway through, you know, there's something that it kind of takes a turn that I didn't expect, but then it feels, you know, when you get to the end, it feels like, you know, completely organic and and necessary. I guess I'm wondering, you know, with a story like Audition, which is kind of this incredible, you know, you've got an actor, a wannabe actor who's working as a general laborer for his father. Where did you, I mean, since this is the first story in the book, like, how much do you remember in terms of like how that story came together? Like, I mean, I don't know if there's any sort of autobiographical elements. Like it definitely seemed like the voice was convincing to, you know, for this situation, but just as an opener, you know, I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. Yeah. If
Sure. So the question is where did the inspiration come from, or how to think about structuring it? From life. I mean, a lot of these stories are autobiographical. Doesn't mean it's all me. Actually, I did an interview not too long ago. There's a story I wrote called ASDF, and it's about somebody who's working in an art gallery and does not like or is having issues with the abstract art. And the interviewer asked me personally, said, "Why do you not like abstract art?" And I said, "I love abstract art." And by the way, there we go, right?
Take a look at
abstract art. See, that proves it. So, I mean, I think I'm a springboard. My experiences are a springboard for most of the stories, including Audition. I do not want experiences that I've lived through to go to waste. I don't want them to go to waste. I want to salvage them. I want to use them for something. When I teach memoir, I mean, that's one of the great things about memoir is like, you went through some shit and okay, now we can use it. So I have the same philosophy with my fiction, is that, you know, there are things that the first book I ever wrote was a memoir. I didn't get everything in there. There's still things I want to talk about.
Right.
When it comes to fiction, though, there's some sort of alchemy that happens, and I'm not trying to now just go, this is all fact and this is exactly how it happened. I feel liberated that I'm not kind of bound by that I could go off. I mean, with Audition, it first occurred to me to try to write that as just a personal essay. And thank God I didn't. I don't know. I feel like I could get somewhere deeper when I went with fiction. I felt like I could go somewhere that I wouldn't have been able to. Just I'd be too married to truth. And the good thing about fiction is I can just if it's not working, I can just throw it away and put something in there that works better.
That makes sense. I mean, I think why I'm sort of approaching it this way is because you're an acclaimed memoirist, and that's how I first heard of you. And I think in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, like, you know, I love this idea of like, let nothing go to waste, right?
Yes.
And I don't know, I'm always taking notes on my phone, or like I have random scraps of paper with stuff. But for you, like you've written a memoir, you're also an acclaimed fiction writer, like, I guess it's, I'm kind of fascinated by, like, you have your life that you've lived, but also all this input, and how do you, is there sort of a holding bay in your mind where it's like, this will go into a story, a fiction story, and this will go into a memoir, a personal essay? Like, how do you kind of sift through? And maybe related to that, are you working on kind of any sort of book length nonfiction at the moment?
So just answer
like
that. Resounding no. Resounding no. Nothing book length nonfiction. Just what I'm working on right now is other stories. Even today, banging my head against the wall of other stories. So the question is like, do I have some sort of holding pen of the experiences and the ideas? Almost, have I kept a journal that, even if it's not a literal journal, is it just in sort of a journal in my brain of possible thing? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think I think maybe there's some big ticket items that I might go, I want to write about that. There's some, like, I'm going to write about that at some point. And then when I get into it, then I think maybe it's like the fridge starts defrosting and I get bits and pieces of dialogue that have stayed with me. Here, I'm going to give you an example. In the story we're talking about, Audition, there's a line where where one of the characters says, am I giving it there's no spoiler alert. We're not talking about Sixth Sense. Okay, so it's one of the guys, he's an addict. And he says something about how one summer he cleaned bricks. I think he says he cleaned the bricks for a nickel a brick. And years ago, when I was in high school, I had a friend who told me he was skipping school that day to go to some building site to clean bricks for a nickel a brick. And I didn't say when I was 17, let me write that down. But there's something about that. It was like he pressed his thumb into my brain and it stayed there. Who knows why I retained it. I think it must have said something to me then. I wasn't a writer then, but I think it's like all of our experiences. They say something, we're not quite sure what they mean maybe at that moment or why they're significant to us, but we are retaining it. And again, let me go back to, this is why writing is so fucking great, is at some point we can use it. We can figure out a way to use it. So I do not have a list of great lines that I've heard in my life. But I think once the wheels get turning, some of these things start to, they just come up. They rise to the surface, the consciousness.
Well, just that hearing you say that line actually gave me so much pleasure. Like there's something about, and I feel like we could just go through my copy of the book is sort of like with any good book, it's just the margins are littered with.
Ed, I've got to get you a nice hardcover signed and
scribed. Oh no, this is even rarer.
That's my gift to you. By the way, thank you for doing this. This is great.
It's my pleasure. Well, I wonder if we could. I mean, there are 7 stories in the book, and they are, some of them, for lack of a better term, they're in a fairly realistic mode, and others kind of diverge, right? Well, maybe, sorry, I feel like I've scrambled the order, but maybe you want to read a little bit from Fairground, because I think that maybe gives us a taste. Audition, I would say, like, at least starts kind of in this realistic, first person voice, and Fairground, I feel like almost immediately we know something's a little bit off from our sense of reality. So
that's right. Yes, that's a good way to put it. Okay, good.
Okay, here we go.
Here we go. A dynamic reading over Zoom. Everybody has got to pay attention. I'm going to give you a quiz afterwards. So yeah, this is called Fairground. I don't know. How long should I read for? 40 minutes? 45 minutes?
An hour probably, yeah.
Hour. All right, this is like whatever, 10 minutes. Okay, so hopefully this is good. I get it, guys. This is Zoom. We're not going to have the full experience of reading, but let's try to make this good. Okay.
Right.
So, Fairground. And as you said, it begins this way. I've only been to one hanging in my life, and that was when I was 6 or 7 years old, or maybe I was 8, but who can really remember that far back with complete accuracy? This also happened to be during the period when the city was being rezoned. Sector A, now Sector G, Sector G, now Sectors Q and R, and so on, thanks to the mayor, who'd won by a landslide. It was going to take a while for everyone to get used to the changes, but everyone agreed that it would be worth it in the end. Sometimes when I was out walking with my mom, we would pass a row of school buses lined up like ducks at the crosswalk, waiting for the light to turn green, the faces of the secured populations looking through the windows with indifference and resignation, as if they'd been traveling for weeks across the country rather than hours across the city. They would be crammed into the buses, children too, twice as many as the bus could comfortably hold, their belongings piled on their laps, often higher than their heads, suitcases, backpacks, lamps without lampshades. If you could carry it, you could bring it. That was the directive. That seemed fair. Don't stare, my mother would say. It's not polite. What I do remember for sure is that I'd been taken to the hanging as something of an afternoon diversion by Mr. Montgomery, my stepfather, the first stepfather in a sequence of several, and with full consent of my mother, who considered the outing a good opportunity for me to bond with a man I'd just met a few weeks earlier. You'll learn to love him, she told me, an upbeat prediction that as far as I could see was based on little evidence. The day trip with Mr. Montgomery had also been a way for my mother to have some alone time so she could study for her upcoming exam, because this also happened to be during that period when she'd gone back to school, mid-30s, trying to do something different with her life, something meaningful, and become a librarian. If all went well, she'd soon be able to get us out of our apartment above the nail salon where we'd been living for a year, and where the scent of nail polish would waft up through the vents between the hours of 10 and 6. I thought it smelled nice, and my mother thought it smelled annoying, and eventually we were so used to it that we no longer smelled it at all. She told me that she'd take me downstairs one of these days so that I could have my nails painted at half price being one of the perks of living above a nail salon. Think about what color you want, she'd said. What colors do they have? They have every color, she said. Then I want blue, I said. No, she said, you have to dream bigger than that. She listed colors I hadn't known were colors. Orange, cream, dream, tiger blossom, tickle my heart, Timberland violet. Tiger blossom, I said. Good choice, my mother said. Seeing Mr. Montgomery and me off on that fall afternoon, she stood in the doorway of our apartment, Dewey Decimal Study Guide under her arm, telling us, have fun, boys. Oh, we will, Mr. Montgomery had said. But the prospect of an outing with me had apparently made Mr. Montgomery contemplative, unexpectedly so. And he'd sat in the parked car for a while, saying nothing, hands on the wheel, key in the ignition, motor off, gazing through the windshield at I knew not what. I'd sat there too, wondering if we were having car trouble. Finally, he turned to me, eyes moist, saying how it had just occurred to him right then how he was passing the tradition downward. Do you know what I'm talking about, son? He'd said. No, I didn't. Yes, I do, I said. He seemed moved by this. He rubbed the back of my neck with something like fondness. The sensation was unfamiliar but pleasant. According to Mr. Montgomery, when he'd been a boy about my age, 6, 7, or 8, he'd been taken to his very first execution by his father, as had his father before him, and so on down the generational line, great, 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 grand. I was dubious that Mr. Montgomery had ever been a boy of my age, let alone a boy at all, but he appeared to remember the past with emotion. Like yesterday, he told me. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. The back of his hand looked old. This was what fathers did with sons, he said. This is what I would one day do with my sons. He spoke with confidence and assertion. I understand, Mr. Montgomery, I said. You don't have to call me Mr. Montgomery, he said. I won't, I said. He wanted me to call him by his first name, William, or one of the variations thereof. You can call me Will or Willie, he said. You can call me Bill or Billy. It was an hour to the fairground, and the reminiscences were going to make us late. He leaned forward in his seat as if doing so made the car go faster. Through the windshield, the scenery of the city passed by at an alarming rate, occasionally broken by a flash of white space where trees and grass had been eliminated and where we could briefly glimpse the towering snow-capped mountain beyond which lay the next city. Frankly, I didn't know what my mother saw in Mr. Montgomery. They seemed to have nothing in common, beginning with the fact that Mr. Montgomery's primary experience in a public library had been to use the public bathroom. I needed to pee bad, he'd said. I didn't find this funny, but he and my mother sure did. And they told the anecdote jointly and often, interpreting the distance that separated them on the compatibility index as something that strengthened their bond, rather than a troubling indicator that they were wrong for each other. Still, the first time I'd met Mr. Montgomery had been for dinner at Applebee's, which had been a promising start. I'd worn slacks and my mother had worn lipstick. They'd sat side by side in the big burgundy booth, and I'd sat across from them as if they were interviewing me for a job, everyone's hands folded politely on the table. Mr. Montgomery had told me that I could go order anything I wanted off the menu, and this added to the air of promise. Sky's the limit, he'd said. He was showing off for my mother. He's going to learn to love you, my mother had said to him. I knew he was trying to curry favor with me. I knew he knew I was the lone obstacle for him being able to sleep with my mother. So I ordered the most expensive thing off the menu. Why not? The double glazed baby back ribs, which I'd never heard of before. Apparently, this was the wrong choice. Don't be presumptuous, my mother said. How about the mac and cheese, Mr. Montgomery said. He was referring me to the children's menu. So I acquiesced and ordered the typical child's fare, chicken fingers and French fries. Why not get a milkshake to go with that, Mr. Montgomery said, trying to prove that he was actually easygoing with money. Yummy, my mother said. No, I said. We arrived at the fairground with barely time to spare. The parking lot was filled to capacity and people were streaming through the big white gate, above which read Sector N welcomes you to the city fairground. Soon this would have to be changed to Sector V. Mr. Montgomery drove around looking for an empty spot, cursing, going in circles, apologizing for cursing, talking philosophically about how this was everyone else's fault, that this was what happened when you stopped paying attention, big crowds, little sensitivity, no parking. Everything is connected, son, he said. Yes, he was happy that the turnout was good because good turnout meant there was civic pride. But civic pride comes at a cost, he said. Back in my day, he said, he extemporized about the past. I said nothing. Do you know what I'm talking about? He said. He didn't wait for an answer. Suddenly he turned to me. There's going to be blood today, son, he said, as if we were only now realizing what this excursion was all about. Are you okay with blood? He asked. He sounded concerned. He sounded as if he were prepared to turn the car around if I had answered no. I wanted to be okay with blood, but I wasn't so sure. I still had scabs on my knees from a few weeks earlier when my mother had tried to teach me how to ride a bicycle. And just when I was getting the hang of it, I'd crashed into the sidewalk. My mother had comforted me briefly, sweetly, cradling me in her lap. And two women from the nail salon had come over wearing aprons, smelling of polish. You have to get right back on, honey, they'd said. I like blood, sir, I told Mr. Montgomery. He liked that I liked blood. Good boy, he said. He said, you don't have to call me sir. And there we have it. All right. And then you got to buy the book if you want to see what happens.
That's
I'm not
well,
City Lights book sales.
Yeah, I hope people.
All right.
I hope people were laughing, or
I hope so. I could hear it. I got good vibes.
I was chuckling, but I feel like at a real reading, we would have
raucous
raucous
laughter.
laughter.
Would it be? Do you think it'd be an uncomfortable laughter, Ed? Would it be an uncomfortable laughter? Am I allowed to laugh at that? It's a hanging. Is that funny?
There are moments, I think, at first where there would be a little bit of tentative laughter.
Yeah.
But I feel like with a line where he's saying any variation of William.
Oh, right, sure.
Will or Willie, Bill or Bill.
Bill or
Like,
Bill.
I think that for me was the, at that moment I was like, oh, you can laugh at the story.
Hey, this is a total digression, Ed. Sorry, this is total digression. But
No,
it
go
is
for it.
interesting that sometimes, like, audiences, you got to figure out a way to give them permission to laugh.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily know how to do that, but I have noticed. I mean, I used to be an actor, and that sometimes I would do a play and it was supposed to be funny, but we would realize, us, the actors, the cast, we would realize they didn't know they were allowed to laugh. So
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I usually say, this is probably says a lot. I mean, maybe a bad habit of mine, but if I'm reading something, I'll make some joke at the beginning. Like at the reading you and I once did many years ago, we were reading in Bryant Park in New York, and I
tell the joke.
I said something like, many of you don't know this, but Bryant Park was my great grandfather or something, and and I think that the story that I read, it had some jokes in it, but I think they got more laughs because permission was given. I mean, I personally like.
I just saw Nicole said, Ed, that's her favorite joke ever. Hey, Nicole, by the way, that's my favorite joke too. I still remember it. Hey, one last digression. I remember Carrie Jones at New York Theater Workshop doing a play that was supposed to be funny. And midway through, she was giving a monologue, and midway through, she told the audience, "You are allowed to laugh." And I had never seen an actress break character and talk directly, break the fourth wall and tell the audience.
But did it work? Did people start?
No, I don't know. So, you know what? I'm not sure.
They started crying.
Who knows? I don't know. But I totally.
The funny thing is, as we talk, we can't really tell if people are
right. Nothing we're saying is funny. This is not.
It's a very funny story in some ways, but deeply unsettling. I mean, just from the very opening, we have this kind of. It almost feels like what's that? Like a dystopian.
Sure.
I'm trying to think of that movie, the YA movie. But anyway,
YA. What, Hunger Games? What are we talking about?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I was thinking the Hunger Games, exactly.
I'll take it.
Yeah. But like the different sector N or sector V or whatever. Right. It feels very just the word sector. Also like kind of you're not in the current day and age.
Hey, and by the way about that, this sort of just going back to the question you had before about like, have I kept sort of mental notes about that goddamn sector thing is something that I thought about years ago, and I was like, I want to somehow get that into a story. I mean, this is well before I was writing any of these stories for this collection, and I just had it. And it's almost like maybe that's my my Moby Dick. It's like God, like I'm gonna figure out a way to get this into a story.
To use the sectors.
Right. I there was something about it that felt so resonant and great. And yes, so lo and behold, now we have it.
I'm surprised you didn't title it Sector.
That's right. That's right.
Well, that actually, I mean, I wonder, well, actually, let's get back to that point in a second. But there was one line here that given this sort of futuristic or surreal scenario and the humor, you also have, I mean, this line killed me, where the mother's trying to, make this outing go well, and then Mr. Montgomery seeming like so old, but then this idea that this was what fathers did with sons, and like and once again, I mean, there are no spoilers really, but it's just like just reading that line, which comes just a couple pages into it, you just get this feeling that this is not going to be what this narrator does with his, like this is where this kind of this line, the
legacy ends here.
The legacy ends, with this wannabe stepfather, and then there's you didn't get to this in your reading, but a couple pages later, I think, where he's kind of Mr. Montgomery is sort of saying, and then back when my father went to these executions, it was with a saber, and before that it was poison, and it's almost like you're pushing it to the edge of parody. I feel like there's something really, or satire, I guess I would say. But it also speaks to, kind of, we can kind of zoom out perhaps from this story to the book as a whole, like this idea of family and the title itself, American Estrangement. I mean, it's such a great and potent title. But you think of, estranged family members, you think of, families in disarray or kind of alienated from each other. And, you know, I wouldn't call this at all a book of linked stories, but there is that kind of thematic pull. And maybe you could talk about that a little, like the way mothers figure into this, the way fathers, you know, and how you think of them when putting together stories, or how does it sort of pan out for you?
Well, first of all, it's deep. It is deep. Hey, Ed, I want to just go back, I think, to the first question, because I just thought of something. And when you said, what is it when I'm writing, I said something about the sentences. I'm guided by the sentences. I just also thought, when you were talking about the humor of the story I just read, I think I'm also guided by a balance between humor and genuine emotion. And I don't want things to get too, I'm at a loss for the proper vocabulary words right now, but I want genuine emotion, but I don't want it to get too heavy. And if I feel like it's getting too heavy, I'll try to lighten it with something comic, but I want everything to feel earned and balanced. And so there's that. But listen, Estrangement, no, it's a hell of a question, because I mean, listen, the dedication of this book is to my mother. Here, I'll read it. It's to my mother who actually just died not too long ago, and it's the dedication is in memory of my mother, Martha Harris. Sorry, let me say this: in memory of my mother, Martha Harris, née Finkelstein, who knew estrangement. So, my name is Saïd Sayrafiezadeh. My mother's name is Martha Harris. I mean, right away, we got something going on there. We got something we got to deal with. You know, this isn't an autobiography, but I am compelled by themes, by experiences of my life, the estrangement that I experienced within my own family. Didn't grow up with my dad. I had a brother and sister who I didn't grow up with. I grew up with my mother. So my dad's Iranian, but I don't know him. And yet I've got this crazy name that Peter did such a great job pronouncing. I've got my name, my mother's name, Martha Harris, but her name is Martha Finkelstein.
Right.
So
I see.
That? You know, she changed her name when she was 12 years old, you know, as a way purportedly to, you know, avoid anti-Semitism in the 1940s in the United States. That will have an impact on you. The burying of something, it's going to have an impact. I don't know. I could surmise what the impact was, and I have a sense of some of it, but you know, I know that whatever it is, it's going to impact you. People have often said to me, why didn't I change my name? You know, especially during the Iran hostage crisis, going back to 1979. I'll be the first to say that was not fun. 10 years old with a name like mine during the Iran hostage crisis. And so people have said to me, why didn't you change your name? And it's a damn good question, but that would have come at a cost. That would have come at, I would have paid a price for that. I would have paid a price for that. Okay. All of this to say, what am I trying to say? Well, all of this to say is that this book is about both internal estrangement and the estrangement that one feels within society, specifically American society. Also how we project what's inside of us, what our worldview. I mean, my worldview was shaped by things that occurred during my childhood that then I overlaid onto the world, which 25 years of psychotherapy has been trying to talk me down from. So yeah, I mean, I think that estrangement is at least twofold. If there's other folds, I would love to hear about them, but it's at least twofold in that it's both how we operate within the world and then our own estrangement on an individual level, a familial level. I think in this book, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I don't think there are any married parents. I don't think anybody's married. Every relationship is damn near on the edge, about to go off the cliff. I don't know, maybe things will work out between Mr. Montgomery and the narrator's mom, but that's not a guarantee. So yeah, familial estrangement and societal estrangement. What else do you need, man? I mean, damn, that's enough to get you.
When did you think of that as the title for your book? There's no story with that title, although the last story in this book, which is absolutely brilliant, a beginner's guide to estrangement, has that word. But when did you think that that would be the title? American Estrangement would be the title for the book?
I think
did you have that phrase?
By the way, that story was the last one I wrote.
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah, it was the last one I wrote for the collection. Yeah, and I think when I wrote that, I said that's somehow that's tying it all together. There's something about that story, or the title ties it all together. And I just felt like let's get closer to the point of American Estrangement. We don't need the beginner's guide. What does that mean? I'm writing a workbook for people. I mean, so yeah. I also like. I mean, the last book I read. I mean, fun fact, it's called Brief Encounters, plural, with the enemy, but there's a story within it that's brief encounter, it's singular. So I thought with American Estrangement that encapsulated the ethos of this book. And I think it was, for me, just more of an aesthetic issue of not going with the long beginner's guide. I think it would also peg it directly to that story. That story specifically. That's one of the only stories that I think mentions ethnicity. There's some references to race throughout, but I didn't want to say this is somehow, I felt like that would be pointing a little too hard at ethnicity, possibly. So, yeah.
Right. Well, it's interesting, this idea of ethnicity. I guess it doesn't surprise me that was the last story that you wrote, because it feels like every story is so tightly coiled in a way, every story in this book. And there's something different. With the final story, A Beginner's Guide to Estrangement, there's something that feels different. And the narrator, who has sort of a Danny McDade, like he has like a very quote unquote American name, Danny McDade, which is his is that his stepfather's?
That's right. He took his stepfather's
surname.
That's right.
And his real name is very Iranian, right?
That's right. His real name is Danish Jamshid.
Danish, right? Exactly.
This is making me laugh. I think this is funny, right? His real name is Danish Jamshid, and then his mother remarried, his American mother remarried. So he took the stepdad's last name, which was McDade, and then he just said, "Fuck it, I'm going to go by Danny." So the Danish Jamshid part, that's gone. That's buried. Nobody knows that.
Yeah.
They know him by Danny McDade. Hey, listen, fun fact about that story, because this is going all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah.
See, what happened was with that one, that actually started out as nonfiction. I was invited to write something for a magazine going back to January 20, back when times were good. Yeah. Except in January 20, see, we're going to forget this. That's when it was like, we're about to go to war with Iran.
Right.
I don't know if people remember that. We were like, it was like, holy shit, there's some stuff happening. Right. So I was invited to write a piece for a magazine. I wrote a nonfiction piece about being Iranian, blah, 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 hostage, I tied everything together. And then the moment passed. And we're not going to war anymore with Iran. That's everything's fine. And the piece never ran. So now I'm sitting with 2,000 words and I'm like, what do I do with this? I did all this work. I said, well, here we go. This is what's great about being a writer. Let me salvage this. I'm going to turn it into a story. All right, here we go. And then we got it. There we go. Thank God the magazine.
I love that.
Thank God that.
Well, it's just the idea also that nothing is wasted, and you sort of take that and it becomes this this really I don't know, this kind of incredible way to close this book. And actually, and I don't mean this as a criticism, because I think actually the structure of having ethnicity only come out at the end, it kind of casts this retrospective light on the other stories, especially, I read it as Expedition, but now I think it's called Scenic Route or something.
That's right.
You changed the title of one of the really great stories in here, where, if I'm not mistaken, it begins basically situating the story in, maybe right after the 2016 election, or maybe right after the 2020 election. or sorry, yeah, no, the 2016 election,
Uh-huh.
where things are bad, and the narrator and his not quite wife yet, right? They're
Right,
kind of debating.
girlfriend, sure.
Yeah,
Been
girlfriend.
together for years, yeah.
All these big questions, and there's something that happens at the end of the story, which is I mean, it's perfectly done, and kind of a shock, right? You get this tension and this menace building up, but then thinking of the final story, like I feel like I read that previous one in a different way. Like you can kind of read all sorts of the kind of ethnic tension that I think was under the surface now just kind of explodes. Like I think there's something really powerful in the way
You're saying
together.
you're saying the last story that deals specifically with Iran and being Iranian somehow reflects back on the earlier story where race is not mentioned in that story.
Exactly.
Right. That's right.
I don't know if that's how I read it. I mean, what I like is the stories are different enough that, I mean, obviously they can be read and savored on their own, but they hang together in this way where they're kind of giving each other power.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you, you were saying earlier in our conversation that today you were working on a story. My question is, were there other completed stories you had that did not make it into this book? Or was it sort of like, here are my 7 stories that I've kind of
Yeah,
the last
no,
7 stories
no, I don't think there were any. No, I don't think so. No, I think everything got in there. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
You know what, Ed? I don't. Listen, if I write a story, I figure out a way to make that work. I don't care how long
Yeah.
it takes me. Some of these stories took me a long time. There's a story in here called "Metaphor of the Falling Cat," of a falling cat.
Great story.
And I worked. By the way, I know I got some students here. Listen, shit takes time. I worked on this. It got turned down by places. I stuck with it. I rewrote it. I got edits back from people. I got suggestions and I stuck with it, figured out a way to make it work. Sometimes this is just what happens. There's some anecdote about Charlie Chaplin years ago when he was doing, oh my God, this is crazy, City Light, when he was making City Light. See how it all comes together, Ed? And he couldn't figure out how to tell one element of the story. I can't remember how many days. I want to say it was like 45 days. He kept everybody on payroll while he just puzzled over how to make this one pivotal moment work. Obviously, they're dealing with, there's no dialogue. It's all got to be visual. So I don't know. That's my inspiration. If Charlie Chaplin did it, I can take some time on my
so maybe we can talk about Metaphor of the Falling Cat.
Sure.
Briefly, like, can you give just a little synopsis or about the character and sort of the setup, and then maybe we can.
Yeah, I listen. We're not.
I think it's a great story. I feel like people should know about it. Yeah.
So basically, it's about a young man who's well, he's been in an accident. He delivered eggs. He was whatever shit job, drove a truck, and he had an accident. And he realizes in his rehabilitation that he actually is struggling with pedophilia, fantasies of pedophilia. And so the story is about his struggle with that, whether or not he's actually going to act on that. I don't know, that's pretty much the long and the short of it.
I was wondering if you were going to go there in this description.
Sure, why not? What the hell?
The way it comes up in the story is so, I mean, it freaked me out as well. It should, but the way you did it without giving too much away, there is kind of a forbidden text within this story that is, you kind of, I believe the story begins with kind of a family reunion, and he's been injured, and there's a lot of funny parts. It's kind of there's a relative who he doesn't quite know, who's trying to describe how he's related to him.
That's right.
And is like,
it's one of those things it's like those family get-togethers. This is a boring guy who corners you and tries to tells you what the family tree is. Yeah.
It's such an inviting setup, and we've had, by this point in the book, sort of I wouldn't say doomed characters, but kind of down on their luck, people young men trying to figure things out. And then you very deftly, like, it's almost like a jump cut. You go from that, somewhat light setup to this place of darkness, and you do it so I don't know. I'll say convincingly. I mean, I felt like this was really working, and then you kind of figure out a way to end it that I just think is great. I mean, now we don't want to get into spoilers, but
thank you, Ed. And Ed, this is why I wanted you to do it tonight, because I love all these compliments you're giving me. This is so great. Hey, but you know what, Ed? Just on a structural level, I think the thing I try to do, or I have at least in my brain, is, I guess it goes back to the comedy drama part. It's like start light and then go heavy. Once you start getting too heavy, then go light again. Like, don't let the reader, I don't want the reader to get ahead of me. I want the reader to think they're getting ahead of me, and then I want to do a hard right turn on them and go, bam, this is not going to be a funny story, and we're going this way. So I think I have that kind of rhythm in my head as well when I'm writing.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like the opposite of that movement kind of happens in Last Meal at Whole Foods, like where you have a very heavy situation. The narrator's mother is dying, and I mean, such a great title too, Last Meal at Whole Foods. And you get their, you get the story of their relationship together throughout his life, and then something about the ending, like it kind of went to a different place emotionally, like it kind of went to higher ground in a way that, like you're saying, you're leading the reader down this path, and then
that's right.
Hard right or hard left.
That's right.
Yeah, so I hadn't thought of that, but I feel like those two stories kind of mirror each other in this really interesting way. I know we're getting close to 10, but should we be looking at questions from from the crowd? Let's see. But where do I find them?
Come on, guys.
So did you want me to pop in and read a few?
Yes, maybe read a few. Yes.
Yeah, sure. So
I just saw the one from Jadra. Something about
yeah. That's the one I was going to pick.
There we go. All right, Jadra. Hi, Jadra. Hi, Jadra. See you in a couple of weeks.
Jadra asks, how and why did you decide to keep pushing with the collection, even when so many folks said no initially? And how did you decide who to ask and listen to for edits?
Wow. Well, first of all, hey, by the way, Jadra is Hunter College, wonderful student, second year. I'll be seeing her in 2 weeks. Hi, Jadra. I can't see you, but wait a minute. But listen, Jadra, I'm not saying it was all. I think she's painting a very dismal portrait, or maybe she's just taken what I said. No, it wasn't. There were some stories in here that were hard, that it took me a while. By a while, sometimes years. Doesn't mean I'm working on it every day, but you know how it is. You put it away, you try it again. No, but okay. Let me answer your point seriously. You know what? It's hard. You've got to figure out. I mean, it's tough. Like at least I knew I'd had some of these published already in the New Yorker. Writing is it's a career where the positive reinforcement is few and far between. So you kind of have to hang on to what you have. I think I also felt like, God damn, I know I got something good to say with this. I know I can make it work. Let me just stay with it. I don't know. It's a bunch. I think it's all of that. But yes, Jadra.
So I have a couple of comment questions that are all sort of following a certain track. Leslie comments, the story about the hanging reminded me of the thousands of executions in Iran in 1988. Was that purely coincidence? And then Nancy comments, when you first said hanging, quote unquote, I thought of the racist lynchings. Fascinating. Death as spectacle, punishment as public chastisement, or moral consensus? Well, okay. So Leslie, oh boy, not consciously. I don't know if I was thinking about Iran and the hangings. I mean, maybe it's there. Maybe it was there. I wouldn't be able to attest to that.
Yeah, I mean, as far as lynch, I'm sorry, read the second part. What was the second thing, Peter? One more time.
So yeah, when you first said hanging, quote unquote, I thought of racist lynchings.
Yes.
Find it fascinating. Death as spectacle, punishment
Yeah.
as public chastisement, or moral consensus? Question mark.
All of it, all of it. Violence as banal acts, everyday acts, violence as, well, in this case, bonding between father and son. I mean, I guess the lottery is in there somewhere. I'm kind of playing off of that a little bit. So yeah, I think it's all there. I think it's violence that in our society that we become just accustomed to, that we don't really notice or question. One of the things I'm trying to do with this book is no one really is all that aware of what the hell's going on with them or what's going on with society, which I think is kind of how we all are. Like, we've got some sense of things, but we're not sure how things are acting on us. So I don't think anybody has any overarching philosophy or insight. In the story of the hanging, I mean, the kid's just going along with it because that's what he grew up with. So he doesn't know any better. He's not questioning anything. When you get deeper into it, it's like he's eating his popcorn there. What else we got? Any other curveballs?
Yeah, JP asks, how conscious are you of the balance you always seem to have with your characters' sadness, loneliness, and sense of humor?
Yeah. Thank you, JP, and thank you for coming tonight. Twitter friend, by the way. Very conscious, very conscious. Going back to, listen, I'm trying to hit a balance. If you had read my stuff, I kid you not, I don't know how many years ago, 15, 20 years ago, super sad. Everything was sad. That was my thing, man. I wanted people crying. And then I got into therapy and it became a little more about like seeing sort of the absurdity of life and the irony, and it's not all bad. And also, listen, I don't particularly like reading those kinds of stories or watching those kinds of plays or movies. So why would I be producing them? If I don't want to sit through that, or if I don't want to read it, I don't want to be producing it. So I think something shifted in me. But yes, I'm trying to go for that balance, JP, and I'm very aware of it. It's something I work on. There are moments, I'm going to give you one thing. We don't have the text in front of us, but in that story that Ed was talking about, Last Meal at Whole Foods, opening scene, he's sitting across from his mother dying. There's a moment at the end of that scene where I needed to hit something that had a little bit of humor, and it took me a while to figure it out, but I did not want to go. After all of that scene, I did not want to end on a down note. I didn't want to go from a down note into the following scene. I wanted to actually hit something that was funny. And it took me a while to figure that out. So yes, conscious of it. Not automatic.
Has another comment. There's a lot of stories where your characters have shitty jobs. Can you speak to the kind of work these folks seem stuck in?
Wait, what was the thing? Can I speak to the what of work?
Can you speak to the kind of work these folks seem stuck in?
Unfulfilling jobs that pay the bills, jobs that you don't get satisfaction from. A lot of jobs that I had. There's a guy who works construction in one of the stories. I did that for a while. My mother was a secretary. That, I think, looms over me. Her unsatisfying work. Honestly, I think it reflects a lot of what we live with in this country. You know, I'm always amazed, like, what's the biggest employer is who in the United States? Who's the biggest employer? Walmart. I don't know. How many stories are we reading about people who work in Walmart? Not that, I don't think that many. I mean, I don't know. Somehow employment seems to sometimes fly under the radar of what we write about. So yeah, I mean, it's a big issue. It's a big issue, satisfying work. And it's an issue for these characters. They don't necessarily know that that's what the problem is, but it's there. It's there. It's a heartbeat underneath it.
So speaking of work, what comes up next? after you've managed to plug the book and you've had a moment to kind of kick back a little bit?
No
You're looking
kicking
forward-
back. No kicking back, man. No, cannot kick back. So I try to tell my students, I was like, do not know. We got to get a schedule. You got to stick with it. No, I'm already working on stuff. I got other stuff. There's a story. I'll go back to Jater's question. There's a story that I wrote. I thought it was great. My agent gave me notes back. I'm rewriting it now. And I had to like tear it apart and put it back together again. So that's what I'm doing now. That's what I'm going to do tomorrow morning. So.
Fantastic. Well, we look forward to that.
Oh.
We are about out of time
Oh my God.
here, but man, this has been a thrill. Really
Thank
an
you.
honor to
Hey.
have you both with us. And
Yes.
Ed, you make a great interviewer. Thank you so much
Thank you,
doing
Ed.
This
this.
is a lot of fun, and it's great seeing you, Saïd. It's great seeing everyone.
Great seeing you too. Thank you, Peter. I wish I could see everybody who's in the audience in person. And either buy my book from City Lights or buy a book from City Lights. So that's what we're going to leave with.